out of my comfort zone. But it has been a lot of fun. And I think probably for me, on the author end of it, the best part about being able to sit in with the first pilot group is it's been a great encouragement to me just to hear discussion over the different questions each week and the different readings each week, and to hear groups really talk about what the lesson was over, and how it applies to y'all's lives and things like that. And I know I've mentioned before the lies that Satan whispered in my ear as I was writing the study, and hearing y'all's interaction with it definitely gives me helps me hold that shield up to know that, I know that he's wrong, but sometimes it's nice to have proof that he's wrong. So I will ask, I feel very uncomfortable asking this because I don't like pushing myself, but I will ask, whether it's good or bad, if you wouldn't mind leaving a review on Amazon, because that, stuff sells by reviews on Amazon. So I'm not gonna, I don't care what the review is. I'm not asking for only good reviews, or please not only bad reviews. I will ask for not only bad reviews. But I would appreciate that if you have a moment in this busy Christmas season. If you have attended this Bible study for any length of time, and those of you that are still coming in, you know of my affinity for Charles Spurgeon. I think I have quoted him at least once almost every single week. And I know there have been several weeks where I have quoted him extensively throughout my talk. The man fascinates me. He was born in 1834 in England to a family of clerics. He attended a local school for a few years. He was very briefly tutored in Greek, but he never earned a university degree. His formal education was lacking, even by 19th century standards. But he read and he read and he read. His personal library eventually exceeded 12,000 volumes. And I think that's probably why I like him so much. At age 15, he broke with family tradition and became a Baptist. And while still a teenager, began preaching. He immediately began filling pews. He was invited to preach in London as a guest preacher, and he never left. Eventually, his congregation at the Metropolitan Tabernacle numbered more than 5,000. And this is in the 1860s. 5,000 people in a church in the 1860s. But perhaps the thing that fascinated me the most about Charles Spurgeon, something that I didn't really know until recently, was he did not even begin preparing for his Sunday sermons until the Saturday night before. And even then, he only sketched out a rough outline. He had an excellent memory and simply preached extemporaneously until his time was up. And then he stopped. The only way we have record of what he said was because there were employed stenographers in the congregation that jotted down his words. And there were also reporters that would transcribe his Sunday sermons and publish them in the Monday edition of the London Times and the New York Times. That was amazing to me in itself. Can you imagine a sermon printed in the New York Times? But anyway, I digress. Yeah. Of course, as a human, he was not without fault, and he was at the center of a few controversies, which would be considered very mild by today's standards. But when he died in 1892, the entire city of London went into mourning. Nearly 60,000 people came to pay respects during the 3 days that his body lay in state at the Metropolitan Tabernacle. And almost 100,000 people lined the pathway from the church to the cemetery as the funeral procession traveled those 2 miles. Flags flew at half-staff in the real clincher for London. Even the pubs were closed. He is striking proof that when God calls you to a job, he will equip you for that position. On March 13th, 1870, in the middle of his preaching career, he actually preached an entire sermon on Hosea 14, verse 4. And I must confess, I have been eagerly awaiting tonight when I get to finally share it with you, because you will be covering Hosea chapter 14, which is chapter 16 in your study, this coming week. And I will say, I am not going to say Spurgeon said every single time I share one of his thoughts or ideas, because I would quickly sound like a broken record. But please know that much of what I say tonight is summarized or quoted from this particular sermon of his, and which he entitled Backsliding Healed. So we're going to zero in on the first 5 words. Well, it's in most versions, it's the first 5 words of Hosea 14, verse 4. In the King James Version, it says, I will heal their backsliding. And here, in just 5 words, God has wrapped up the entire gospel message. Their backsliding. It is in the present tense, that never-ending struggle of the flesh to pull us away from God. And I will heal. Sin abounds, but grace abounds all the more. We're going to start with the last word, backsliding. In the Hebrew, it is the word meshuva, and it means apostasy or turning away. The very word should evoke chilled spines and heads hung in remorse, because we know that we have all been there at one point or another. And if we were completely honest, I'm sure we could all probably confess that we are all there now to some degree. Maybe we approach our quiet times with the drudgery of obligation instead of the passion of loving desire. Maybe we have abandoned our quiet times altogether. Maybe our hearts are discontent, proud, bitter, or selfish. Maybe, instead of running the race laid out for us, we are loitering. Or worse yet, maybe we have veered off course, distracted by side streets that we were never meant to travel. Yes, we have all failed in many ways. We are all guilty of backsliding, and backsliding is one of the most dangerous things into which a child of God can fall. It endangers all present joy, severely limits our usefulness, and imperils our future. But no professing Christian falls into open backsliding all at once. As the current song says, this is not Spurgeon. He was not this prophetic. But as the song says, it's a slow fade. Most of the time, if you see a tree blown down by a strong wind, you can look carefully at it and see that insects have been at work on it for years, weakening it from the inside out. And therefore, when the last trial came, it only consummated what had long been going on. Backsliding is not so dangerous because of where it begins, but because of what it leads to. And it always leads to defilement. You cannot lose the intensity of your love for Christ without becoming more worldly. You cannot abate your striving toward holiness and avoid impurity. You cannot be less in prayer without being less like God. And where God withdraws his manifest fellowship, sin is all too ready to step in and fill the vacuum. Backsliding is defiling, and it is also contagious. The whole army is impeded by the lagging of a single regiment. And this is why backsliding is so grievous. But we will talk no longer of our shortcomings. If we see sin sufficiently enough to make us ashamed, then we may look away, ready to speak of the next word, heal. I will heal their backsliding. And this is perhaps one of my favorite parts of this short sentence, because there is great comfort in the fact that the Lord looks on our backsliding as a disease. He does not say, I will pardon, but I will heal. He remembers that we are dust, that we are liable to 1,000 temptations from the fall, and that we often go astray. And yet, he has decided to look upon us not as rebels, but as patients. To view our sin not as a condemning iniquity, but as an overpowering disease. Observe then that he also does not say, I will put this diseased one away. Though the legal code required those with leprosy or other contagious diseases to be put outside the camp, it is not here said, I will banish them for their backsliding. He does not say he will expel us, destroy us, disinherit us, or strike our names out of the book of life. No, he will heal us. Note 2, according to the text, who it is that acts. I will heal their backsliding. He has not promised that their backsliding will be healed by unknown or mysterious ways. He does not even say that his word or his ministers will heal them. No doubt he graciously uses his word and ministers to bless his children, but it is neither the words nor the ministers that can do anything. Only when the Lord puts his hand to work behind the word and behind his ministers can anything be done. It is the Lord, Jehovah Rapha himself, who heals us, the all-powerful, all-wise, to whom nothing is secret nor too difficult. He can speak even to the dead and make them live. No matter how far we have gone or how broken our heart is because of it, he can bind up our wounds. And rest assured, as my behavioral therapist has told me, if God has said it, he will do it. I will heal their backsliding. First of all, he will do it because he said he will. He is not a man that he should lie. But also, because he views our backsliding as a disease in need of healing and has vowed to heal it, he has thus taken on the role of a physician. For a physician to fail in his attempts brings him no honor. Every patient that the physician loses is a loss to the fame of his skill. I will heal their backsliding, he says. And are we not his children? A doctor may fail to exercise his skill on a stranger, but should his own child grow ill, there is nothing in the whole realm of medical knowledge and technology that he would hold back from his child. Though we are worth nothing, we have cost our God too high a price for him to suffer us to perish. And perish we must without his healing. On every child of God, the Father sees the marks of the Redeemer's blood. You who believe in Jesus cost too much. Nothing, not even repeated adulterous backsliding, will separate us from the love of God. But the final word is crucial for healing. I will heal their backsliding. In Hosea 14:4, God was speaking directly of Israel's sin. But as we have seen through this study, it is an example for us as well. Those of whom he spoke, the ones that were to receive the healing, were willing to come forward and own their sin. They were fully aware of their shortcomings and failures and faults. Lord, heal my backsliding. We cannot apologize without first admitting fault. Prayers of repentance are just empty words unless they are accompanied by a heart broken under the weight of its own sin. But he who breaks our hearts also heals them. And how does he heal us? The next part of Hosea 14:4 tells us. He presents us with a fresh sense of his great love for us. Hosea 14:4 says, I will heal their backsliding. I will love them freely. He reminds us that we are still his children and draws us back to him with cords of loving kindness. You see, if the prodigal son had once suspected that he had been disowned and was no longer a child, he would have given up all thought of return. But upon his arrival home, he confessed that he was no longer worthy to be called a son, indicating that he knew he was still his father's son. When we remember how the Father loves us, our hearts of stone become like the stone that gushed water. We return to our first love with humbled hearts. We take words to the altar. For if backsliding began in forsaking prayer, then healing begins in renewed supplication. We willingly, gladly put away our idols before they put away our Christ. And with simple faith, we return to God. Once healed of our backsliding, we do not dwell in the shame of the past, but instead forget the things which are behind and press forward to that which is ahead, looking to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And should we ever find ourselves backsliding again, when we find ourselves backsliding again, we still have hope. The mercy seat is still there. He will heal our backsliding. Father God, Father, I just thank you so much for this group of women. Father, I thank you so much for how vulnerable and honest and just full of laughter and joy. Father, I thank you so much that though we are nothing, Father, you not only paid the price for us once, but continue to heal us over and over and over again from our own stupidity. Father, I pray that you would just keep your love ever present in the front of our minds, Father. Father, that every single time we mess up, that you would once again make your love new to us and draw us back. Father, I praise you because you never give up on us. It's in your name we pray. Amen.